All right, today I am speaking with the Thais Sky. I hope I say that right, Thais. Is that right?
You said that beautifully.
Okay,
Yes.
good. She is an esteemed women's leadership expert, international speaker, yoga instructor, and neuro-linguistic practitioner, which she can maybe tell us what that is. She speaks a lot to the worthiness wound of women.
Mm,
So welcome, Thais. Thanks for coming and talking to the group.
thank you.
Yay, I'm excited to have you here. You're very different. You're completely unique in anything that anybody that I've ever brought into the show. This is very unique.
Oh,
And
good.
I know I searched the internet for the people that have something different to bring to the table that could relate with and connect with somebody, right? Because we're all going to need something different in order to fully express who we are and get to all of our health goals and weight loss goals. And so
Totally.
this is why I've brought you in here. So tell us, how did you come to this place that you're at in your life?
Yeah. Well, it all kind of started for me in college. I went to a school that was 300 miles away. I went to Boston, and I'm from Maryland. And I was in a long distance relationship, and that was bringing up a lot of stuff for me. And I developed a binge eating disorder in college. Um, and that led me on a journey of trying to understand why I was obsessed with food in a way that I've never been obsessed with food. And I had absolutely no control of what I put in my mouth. And so I would balance that out by going to the gym. I would spend 2 hours on the elliptical. I would obsess over my body. I obsessed over calorie counting. I obsessed over my weight. It was all a number obsession for me. And it
Yeah.
would take up 99% of my time. I would always be planning what's my next meal, what I'm going to eat, how much calories did I consume. I had a calorie journal where I counted everything I ate. Apple, 50 calories. I thought that was going to be my existence. That was going to be my life, that I was always going to hate my body, and I was always going to be trying to fix myself. And so it was my last year in college when I had a dark night of the soul experience where I had a complete breakdown. I remember I was in my friend's apartment in Boston. She didn't have any air conditioning. It was the middle of the summer. And I remember obsessive compulsively thinking about wanting to eat the block of cheese that was in the fridge and feeling like that's not the answer. I don't want to eat that block of cheese, but I do want to eat, right? And I knew that the minute I took that first bite, I was not going to be able to stop. And I was just in a lot of pain. And so I prayed, and I didn't believe in God. I don't know, what is that stuff? But I was so desperate for something that I
Yeah.
prayed. I put my hands together and I said, God, hi, Thais here. Don't know if you know me, but I need help. I need help. And I got a response. And the answer was, you're going to be okay. And in retrospect, I joke and I'm like, what the fuck does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, what is that? But in the moment, it was really the catalyst I needed for me to recognize that I wasn't alone in the universe, and that I, didn't have to fight for my space, that maybe there was a different way. So that was the beginning of my journey of self-love. I don't know if you've heard of that concept, kind of radical. How to love myself, how to be kind to myself. That's when I started practicing and studying Buddhism and Hinduism and yoga and philosophy and spirituality. And that led me on a journey of being a health coach and supporting women with emotional eating, realizing I don't actually give a crap about what people eat.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what's underneath there, because
Yes.
it's never about the food. It's always about something else.
Yeah.
And
I
so
always say that.
on the journey, I've
Food to eat
just
smart.
stepped into where I'm at now, which is a real commitment at looking at this sense of unworthiness that I feel so many women carry around them, and how it is this hole that we have within us, this deep sense that we're broken and we don't belong and that we're not meant to be here, that I feel like so many of us cover by obsessing with food or trying to control our lives, or, trying to dive into career and workaholism or shopaholicism, or numbing out through food, numbing out through TV, numbing out through alcohol. So that's been my journey. And now I'm here, and now this is the work that I get to do.
And how for somebody that is new to this, I think what I find in my own practice is majority, I would say a good like 90% of the women I see have no idea that this concept of unworthiness even exists inside of them. It takes somebody to actually point it out and say, hey, you're worth more than this.
Yeah.
You know, that the women, they think that the only time they can even take a break is maybe for that 10 minutes at the end of the day where they have a glass of wine, and it's like the world to them. And I'm like, because you never feel okay to slow down. You never feel okay to just stop.
Yeah.
So for somebody this is like, what is she even fucking talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Help that person out to understand where it is what you mean by this, the worthiness wound.
Yeah, so the concept of the worthiness wound was developed when I started to recognize a pattern within the majority of the women that I was working with, which is, you know, when you do slow down, it becomes really overwhelming.
Yes.
And you're just getting inundated with thoughts such as, I'm not good enough. How could I have done that? You know, we overanalyze the day. We analyze the past. We're obsessing over the future. We're constantly feeling like where we are is not okay. And we live in a society that really supports that belief. And I think that that's why it's so hard for us to recognize that that's actually not an inherent truth for us women. You know, we live in a society, for example, that obsesses over women's bodies. So it's no wonder that we obsess over our bodies. Look at all the TV, magazine, advertisements telling us that we have to look a certain way. And when we do, we'll get everything we want. But that's not actually an inherent part of us. We're not born obsessing over our bodies, right? The other way that society really keeps us distracted is this obsession with work and valuing what we do as a function of whether we belong on this planet. And so we sense this when we give ourselves permission to slow down or we go on vacation. We feel the sense of guilt. And I really should be working, or we don't really give ourselves even time off. We don't even allow ourselves that because we have to be working and moving and functioning. And it's a way that we're allowing society to rob us of our power. And that's why I love the word reclaim, because that's really what we're doing here, is reclaiming what is the truth for us. And the truth is our worth is not dictated by what we do. And when we place our worth, our validation, our happiness on the results of our work, we're always going to be riding the roller coaster, right? Of validation, of if you do a good job and you get a praise, you're happy. But if you mess up and you don't do a good job and you don't get the praise, you feel, you know, worthless. You feel broken. We've got to get off that roller coaster if we really want to reclaim ourselves and find a sense of belonging on this planet.
Where do you think this comes from? Because it's so apparent to me that women base their worthiness on how much they can do in a day. Is this a cause because we just fought so hard for feminism that we've overdone it? We've gone to the extreme of the other side, and now we need to pull it back a little bit?
Yeah, I think there's many areas where this can come from, but one of the main things that I see is we do live in a masculine-driven society. And I want to pause, and when I say the words masculine and patriarchy, I want to remove the judgment of, you know, men are bad or men are wrong and this is bad. This is not a men versus women conversation. It's just the reality is that over 4,000 years ago, the rise of the men lineage became predominant over women lineage. And so it's unfolded into where we are now, where we live in a society where the masculine traits like intelligence and drive and workaholic, work obsession, right? And the validation of doing is glamorized. And so women, we don't thrive under that atmosphere. And again, that's not to say that we shouldn't have drive or we should knock our intelligence by any capacity. It's just we never really create the space to honor the other side of that, which is that kind of feminine energy of the creative, the intuition, the softness, the flow. And so because we live in a society that really isn't created for women, that really doesn't give space for women's powers. For example, emotional intelligence is something that women are really known for. When we look at traits of leaders, the most successful leaders have the traits of being a team builder instead of a self builder. They have the traits of being a communicator and a listener. They have the traits of being having emotional intelligence and being cognizant of how other people are feeling. And these are all traits that are innate within women. We actually are better natural leaders than our male counterparts. But because our society is so pushing the idea of this masculine drive of do, we're never going to feel at home. So we're all going to be navigating our worthiness wound in our lifetime. But what we can do is start to change the narrative and start to reclaim the parts of ourselves that we've lost because of our society and because of our childhood, wounding, and because of everything else. And so in that way, my goal, my vision is that we can become more whole. We can integrate the masculine and the feminine within ourselves. And hopefully in that way, we get to show the world that there's both, and we have to have both. We've got to have integrity of a structure. And right now the structure isn't an integrity because it's too much reliance on the masculine.
Yeah. And so how would somebody even begin to try to find that balance in their life? Because I know as a working woman myself with kids and a husband and trying to balance all of it together, and I know many women feel this way, it's like, how do we even begin to express that feminine side and to feed into it? Because I really do, I hear what you're saying, and I think that it is something that we have shoved down and it's not being honored anymore.
Yeah. So, there's so many ways, and we all have to find what's true for us. And I'm very gentle when I use the word feminine and masculine, because I don't want to imply that the solution to our problem lies in wearing more skirts and having flowy hair, right?
Yes.
It's more of beginning to trust the traits that we've released a long time ago because we've been taught that it doesn't fit under the paradigm of the patriarchal narrative. So one way that we can begin is starting to develop a new relationship with our emotions.
Okay.
So, our emotions are extremely powerful. And we've been told that we're too emotional and stop being so emotional. But all humans have emotions for the most part, unless they have some genetic problem. But
yeah.
All humans have emotions, and emotions are actually what's driving 99% of our decision making. So this idea that we're so logical and that you should, be reasonable and never make decisions from a place of emotions is actually complete baloney. So it's time for us to start to honor and acknowledge and notice our emotions and what they're trying to tell us, instead of pushing it down and saying, oh, we're too emotional, we're too needy, we can't be relied on making good decisions. I think that that's all crap.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah. So emotions is a great place to start. So for example, when you're, noticing yourself being sad, instead of pushing at it and saying, oh, I shouldn't feel sad because there's no reason to be sad and blah, blah, blah. Can you just take a moment and say, actually, I'm just going to give myself permission to really feel this, to really allow this to be here, to trust that the emotion actually has a purpose. So many of us push away the negative, and we are obsessed with the positive, and we live in a culture where everything has to be positive, and if you're not being positive, then you're being negative, and you can't dare being negative. But we have to allow ourselves to give the full spectrum of our emotions, or else what ends up happening is we harbor resentment, we harbor anger, we stuff everything down, and then we create dis-ease in our body, we create challenges in our relationship, and we disconnect ourselves from our body and from our truths.
Yeah, I just read your post on the about the positive thinking. I loved it.
Yeah, fuck positive thinking, and pardon my French, but it's like there is a time and a place for thinking positively, of course, but I found that often it comes at the expense of the realness of what is here. And I think what's more important is for us to honor all that comes up rather than push ourselves into thinking things we don't really think.
Yeah. And how would if somebody was to look at their life and try to find where this imbalance might lie, where do you see it showing up?
What do you mean? What do you mean by balance?
Like for you, it showed up in binge eating, depression, over exercising,
overspending.
For me, workaholic, and I was raised by a super independent mother that was like, you don't need help from a man, go, go, go. be strong, be independent, don't be weak, don't be, you can do everything on your own. So that's how it showed up for us. And I think that for so many women, it's showing up, in their weight, in their emotional eating, right? That they're not honoring all sides of themselves.
Yeah. When we're told, I do a lot of work in going back into your childhood, because the majority of our belief systems is established before the age of 10. So, and we have like 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, and something like 80% of them are the exact same thoughts that we had the day before. So we're basically running the same thoughts that we've had since we were like 7 years old, the same belief systems, the same patterns, the same cycles, and we're not really autonomous. Like we're not really free. We're not really liberated in our decision making, because of the perspective that we have on our, on a daily basis is really dependent upon our childhood. So if we really want to change the results in our lives, we have to go to the source. We have to look at where we developed that belief system and what's there, and honor the truth that is there, and honor our experience that is there. So for example, in your instance, the fact that your mother taught you to be independent in many ways is a beautiful truth. In many ways it is true, because, in that era, at that time, women were very much dependent on men. And so she taught you this resilience and this independence that is so beautiful. But in our internalizing of that as children, we tend to go to the extreme, right? We tend to go to, well, then I never can be, dependent, or else I'm showing weakness. Mm-hmm. But what I've seen in relationships is that there's actually a really healthy level of dependence required in order for us to have a healthy relationship. So this idea that we can't be needy or dependent or codependent on our relationship, it actually is keeping us from developing a real sense of intimacy with our partners. And so there has to be a place where we are dependent. There has to be a place where we rely on somebody. And the stronger that attachment, the more confidence we'll have in actually being able to go out into the world. So we have to look at these childhood beliefs that we've now cultivated into adulthood, and get to the truth of, what's true, what's good in this, and how did it land in me, and how is it affecting my life?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And how do you consider yourself then a feminist?
I do consider myself a feminist. I consider myself an intersectional feminist. So to me, feminism is about advocating for women's rights.
Yeah.
And I don't see why there's any problem with that. I know that word feminism has some really negative stigma. Yeah. And I actually think that was really brilliant. It was really brilliant way to keep women from supporting one another, is by adding a stigma to the word feminism, right? Because when you say I'm advocating for women's rights, people are like, oh, okay, that's no problem. But then the minute we add the word, there's so much negative stuff that people are terrified to claim the word. So they're terrified to actually advocate for women's rights. So that's unfortunate. So yes, so I am a self-proclaimed feminist, and I'm proud of it, because I think women are going to change the world. And it's time that we own our power and own our confidence, and start to reclaim the parts of society that's told us that it's not okay, so we can be whole, so we can change the world.
I totally agree. And I consider myself a feminist as well. And same as you, where I don't say to people, oh, I'm such a feminist, because of the stigma of that word. Yeah, and I want it to change. And I feel like we need to almost bring it back.
We do.
I feel like in our generation, it's like our mothers fought for that. And then now there's this group of women that are still considered the feminists, but so many women are very quiet right now. Mm-hmm. And I work with women all day, and how much sexism is still happening, how much repression of the female is still happening, especially in a home environment. Mm-hmm. And it's like, where do we even start to help women to see what's actually going on here? Without coming across as the feminist.
The word feminist got attached to man-hater, bra burning.
Yeah.
It got attached to the radical, because there is a radical branch of feminism that hates men. There is, but there's radical branches in everything. And look at Islam. There is a radical branch of Islam that is creating, terror in the world. And yet that's not the majority of Islam. The majority of Muslim, tradition is very peaceful, and they believe so much in peace. So when we allow the radicals to take over the word, then they've won. Right? So I think we need to be reclaiming that word and using that word and being proud of that word and being proud of being for women. And that doesn't mean against men. It just means for women. So where do we begin? That's such a great question. I think one of the best ways to begin is to see where we've internalized our own sexism.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So like where we actually diminish other women.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, we think of the word doctor, we immediately think of men, right? Just as an example,
okay. Yes.
Right there is an instance of where we're actually playing into the sexist narrative that, these roles are only given to men. So we really have to start to notice where we're believing the stereotypes about women, like that women are gossipy and they're drama and it's all about drama. That's actually not the case. And if we're believing it, then we're perpetuating the stigma.
Yeah.
So I think it's really looking at where are we, judging another woman by her clothing instead of by her qualities, where are we, being harder on women than we would be on a male counterpart. We have so much of that against ourselves, like perfectionism, that we then expect perfectionism amongst other women. Another big one is gaslighting. Right. So gaslighting is this concept developed by a play. I don't remember when it was written, but it was a play where the husband every day would come home and would turn down the gas for the lights in the house just a tiny bit. And when the wife was like, isn't it darker in here? He would be like, no, it's not darker. You're crazy. Like, you're making that up. And so he would dim it and dim it and dim it. And she would be questioning her perception of reality. Like, am I going crazy? But I think it is. But he's telling me I'm crazy, so I must be crazy. And then at the end of the play, I think he kills her. So we gaslight each other when we basically say your experience isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
We invalidate people's experience because they're not our experience. So if someone says, I feel hurt, and you're like, well, you shouldn't feel that way. Well, that's not what happened. We're invalidating their experience. And so gaslighting each other is a huge way in which we continue to diminish each other's voices. Because if I'm making you question yourself, then you're less likely to want to speak up. So we have to notice when we're silencing other women, when we're unconsciously knocking other women down, and do that work if we're to really then come together so we can change the world.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, so we can change the world.
Yeah.
Just a small thing, but we can.
Just a small thing. I believe it. I so believe it. And what that looks like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just, women are so much more connected to nature and to the cycle of life. And I think if we can have more women and like whole women in power, we're going to see a change in our relationship with the earth and our relationship with our climate. I just think that there's so much incredible strength in women that we're really missing from the conversation.
Yeah, we're missing the honoring of natural female characteristics and the natural male characteristics. And it's not to say that every one of us has to have either of those. Some women will have more masculine characteristics and vice versa.
Sure.
But that it's okay that we don't have to be one way or another, that being really feminine and emotional and being in touch with that is really okay. And we
all have that. And we all need to address that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The patriarchy. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just to go back on, we talk about the radical part that had to happen. And I think that's just it. It had to happen. We had to get really radical with feminism in order to be heard. And now I feel like we got to just pull back and give it a different, like you said, a different energy to the name feminism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
It's a good thing. I mean, don't we want to see more equality in terms of women represented. You know, there's a lot of arguments that women have everything we need. Like, we have access to everything we need. And while some of that is true, that's actually, it's not spread out equally. Like, Black women have less, Latina women have less resources than white women. So not only is it spread unevenly amongst women, it's actually not true. There's actually so much continued insidious sexism, and it's become so overt, so hidden, that it's so much harder to see, but it is so definitely there.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure if the goal is equality in terms of, I don't even know what equality would look like.
Yeah.
I just think it has to have both parties at the table and have that conversation.
And both be honored. I remember reading, oh God, I wish I could remember the name of it. It took place back in like just before Christ, kind of time before Christ. And it was about how women were looked at, like the men would run off to war and the women were honored, and they did stay home and caretake children, but they were considered almost as, I don't want to say higher than men, but certainly of extreme value. And I think that that's what we need to find again. It's not that, you know, we need to find like you said, it's equality, but at the same time, it's just finding that beauty again in women that I think that we've forgotten about.
We have. And because of that immediately connects us to a sense of unworthiness, where we are born feeling not of this world. We are born feeling like we don't belong. We are born feeling like we're inherently broken. And it's because we're not honored or cherished in the same way. And it's a real shame, because it's leading us to play small. It's leading us to obsess over our bodies and over, you know, our physical looks, instead of using that time to build ourselves up. You know, we're consumed with being distracted.
Yeah.
And there's a way that we can be healthy and whole and honor our bodies and move and find, you know, our intuitive guidance and find our sense of home within our bodies without obsessing over calorie counting, without obsessing over, you know, our next meal and what we're going to eat and isn't in alignment with our very regimented diet. We just got to move beyond that conversation. So we've got to do the necessary healing so that we can move beyond it, so we can spend our time and resources doing things that actually matter. Because at the end of the day, whether you weigh, you know, 120 or 130, it doesn't really matter in the context of the work that we've got to do, the voice that we have, the power that we have. And again, it's not saying that we can't be committed to feeling good. It's just, we've got to do that and then move forward.
Yeah. How did the work that you did help you to find your worthiness?
Yeah. You know, it's amazing. I'm at the place now where I don't calorie count. You know, I don't even, this is a miracle, Karen. Yeah. I don't know how, you know what I mean? Like I always thought I was going to be obsessing over my calories, and I'm not, and I don't weigh myself, and I'm not, you know, a bajillion pounds that I thought I was going to be if I let go of the control. Right. And it took 10 years, you know. It was not an easy journey. It was the necessary journey for me, you know, and it started with taking this work, this internal work, seriously. You know, we're so obsessed with having something outside of us be the answer. You know, this person, this book, this resource, this thing will be the answer. But we've got to start to really look at the fact that if we don't change our internal stuff, we really are just going to keep reproducing the same results. Everything starts by committing to going within. And the best part is, we are always being told where we can start, you know, where you can start by going within. Just look at what you're not getting in your life. Just look at the relationships that are challenging in your life, right? Just look at any part of your life that you're dissatisfied. Right there is an arrow for where we can start to do the internal work.
Yeah. And when you say internal work, what was that for you? And what would you suggest for someone that's wanting to explore these? Like, do you have tools?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. Come on, give me the tools. I'm all about the tools.
Well, for example, like, I'm not getting a raise and I'm really frustrated because I'm not getting a raise and my boss is an asshole and like, he just doesn't listen to me. And if he just listened to me and saw me, then like I would get a raise. So like, how can I make sure that he sees me? Like I gotta maybe if I show up in this way, or maybe if I just keep working harder, or maybe, and that entire dialogue is all outside of you, right? It's all external. It's all, well, what can I change about the situation to get what I want? And instead, I invite you to look within, right? And start asking yourself the question of like, why is this, what's the dissatisfaction? Why is this bothering so much? Like what's the truth in this situation? Like what's the grain of truth of how I may be contributing to this situation? And so the first tool, the one that started it all for me was just to commit to a meditation practice.
Awesome. Okay.
I mean, that's the only way to go. That's the only place to begin, because until we start to just find some distance between, who we are and our thoughts, if we continuously think that our thoughts are who we are, then we're never going to have the space to change. The way I see it, it's like we never think stupid thoughts. Like we never see this and say, oh, this is a lime green paper. No, we look at this and we're like, oh, it's a white piece of paper. So because we never have these stupid thoughts, then the thoughts of I'm unworthy, I'm broken, I'm bad, I'm not good enough, I can't get that, I couldn't do that, then we believe those too. Like we believe that those thoughts are truth, but they're not. They're not. So it's time for us to start to separate ourselves from those thoughts, have some distance, so we can start to respond to life instead of react.
Yeah, and it's so busy around us now that it's so challenging not to think those thoughts, like you said in the beginning, when all around us the media is telling us we do not look good. Go on a diet. Being overweight is terrible. You have to wear makeup. You have to do this. You have to do that. That meditation is turning all of that off.
Yeah. And I know that there's so much stigma around meditation, and it's frou-frou, and it's, all these things. But the invitation here is, can we start to just settle into our bodies? We spend so much of our day like tossing out energy. Everything we're doing is pulling ourselves off of our center. So can we dedicate some time every day to just bringing ourselves back to center? And at first it's terrifying because of what we talked about at the beginning. Like we're so scared of actually slowing down with these crazy thoughts. And so if meditating right off the bat feels like so terrifying to you and you can't even handle the possibility of being with it, then start somewhere else. Like, start practicing doing mindfulness while you're doing a daily chore. So, every time you wash the dishes, spend time actually noticing yourself wash the dish. Or when you're brushing your teeth, notice the brush moving through your teeth. Like, where can you just practice slowing down and mindfulness and being with what is here? And then once you feel comfortable in that, then you've created the platform to then start meditating. And I always say, just start at 5 minutes, 2 minutes. You don't have to be a yogi in a cave meditating for 10 hours. Like, just start with where you're at. 1 minute in the bathroom, between meetings, before your lunch break. Like, it doesn't have to be some glamorous on your cushion with mala beads. It just needs to be, how can you check in with yourself and how you're feeling and how you're doing on a more consistent basis? Yeah.
Mine was, I couldn't sit in the beginning with meditation. I found it so uncomfortable. And then I started doing yoga. And then I found, it taught me then to be still inside my head. It was moving meditation for me. And that connected with me, was yoga. And now I can sit and meditate. But I know the more uncomfortable I am with sitting and meditating, the more I need it.
Yes.
And I tell women that if you're really uncomfortable with just sitting quietly and not doing anything, even just sitting there, don't even meditate, just sit and do nothing. They're like, you could see them just start squirming in their body, just the thought of it. They can't handle it. It's like, no, but I got to keep going.
Yeah.
It's like it's a vicious circle.
Yeah. So we've got to start there. And then once we're able to do that, then we can start to really look at, questioning some of our beliefs and questioning some of our patterns and our wounding and our trauma. I mean, this is all stuff that I go really deep into, because we all have it. You know, we all are operating in a deeply traumatized place, whether we know it or not. And if we really, really want to find freedom, that we've got to start by just being able to slow down.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I think that's a good place to end the conversation, because that's fantastic.
I could just keep going forever,
Karen. We could just, I have so much more to say about my views on feminism.
It's so good. It's so good. I love that you're a feminist. And, you know, something that I've been really sitting with is that we've got to be intentional in making sure that our advocacy for women includes all women and not just women that look like us. You know, there is a concept called white feminism, which is, you know, an advocating for feminism, but really only the feminism that applies to white women. And, you know, there's such a variety of needs that women have that may or may not be applicable to white women. And we've got to be cognizant of that. You know, we've got to support all women rise, or none of us are going to rise. And so the lives of trans women is just as important as our lives, you know? So while there's still, you know, a hunt for Black trans women and they're being killed and being persecuted, you know, while that's going on, it doesn't matter if we get reproductive rights. We're still not free. You know, so we have to be looking at making sure that our feminism, our advocacy, our commitment to women is all women, and that we're inclusive in that conversation, and not just in the narrative of, well, this is the only thing that's important to me, and therefore this is the only thing I'm going to speak of.
Yeah, if anything, they need it more than the white women do.
Yes,
I see it. They have it much harder than we do.
Oh my God. You know, they say like the fence is as strong as the weakest link sort of thing. You know, the community, our collective power is only as strong as our ability to tend for those that are most vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right. I love that you said that. That's exactly right. We need to be using our privilege. You know, we're pretty, we're white, you know, we have it so much easier. You know, we're able-bodied, we're relatively slim according to society's standards, right? So we have it so much easier. You know, we've got to be using that privilege as a sense of responsibility for those that don't have those things.
Yeah, it's something that I really try to teach my daughter, because I see that that's how it's going to change, is with teaching it to our own children. Yeah.
So good. I love that you're doing that. That's so important.
Yeah, and she's being raised to, when she sees racism on TV, she doesn't even understand it. She looks at, well, why are they doing that?
Yeah.
I don't get it. What, just because she's a person of color? Yes.
Yeah.
Why.
Yeah. And it's so important to say, yes, that is why. And, you know, we've got to be able to acknowledge, like, there is a whole theory, you know, it's called color blindness. It's the sense of we're all one. There's no color. I don't see color. But when we spew color blindness, we're actually perpetuating racism, because we're not actually atoning. We're not addressing the fact that actually there is color. We've built the concept of color. Now this is ours to take care of. And we can't just ignore it. You know, we've got to honor, like, yes, there is color. And because that their person is that color, they're going to have it much harder. One, we have to make sure that we're not contributing to that hardship. But two, we've got to honor their hardship and really look at how we can use our voice to support their hardship, to really listen to them instead of, you know, bulldozing them with our voices and centering it all on us, because we're the ones that have been getting all the attention in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
But I love that you're doing that. This is why I look forward to possibly someday, maybe in 30 million years, having children, because they're just going to be my dumpster for all my beliefs. I'm just going to brainwash the shit out of them.
I feel the same way. I'm always so happy that my daughter thinks that way, that she thinks that, well, how dare somebody, just because they're a person of color or they're gay or they're trans, should be treated any differently. She's just was, well, that's just stupid, Mom. I'm like, yes, it is. It is the epitome.
It is the epitome of stupidity. Yeah. So, you know, for all of you listening, again, I think it really goes back to just really noticing where you're perpetuating sexism. Start there, you know, because that's so insidious. That it's so hard to see. But when we can start to see it, like just notice how your relationship with women of color are. Like if you're walking down an alley and you see a woman of color walking down, what is your natural propensity? You know, studies show that white women look down and don't actually make eye contact with women of color in the same, you know, what is up with that? So just start noticing that, right? We've got to start to notice our, you know, this is what I call intersectional feminism. It's the intersection of both race and sex. It's like we are all in intersection. I'm an intersection of being an immigrant and being a white woman. So the intersection creates different experiences for all of us.
Yeah. Yeah. I
could preach forever. So, whew.
Hear ya. So where can my listeners find you?
Yeah, you can go on my website, ThaisSky.com. I also love Facebook and Instagram, and I am Thais Sky on those places.
Okay.
And you'll find me having feminist rants and talking about 45 and worthiness. And
you work with people one-on-one, correct?
I do. Yes, yeah. I do one-on-one work, and I have a couple digital offerings on my website.
To help women find their worthiness?
Exactly.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah. So if people want to explore that more, then they can go over to ThaisSky.com and I'll put
come over.
Oh, come on over. Go check it out. Join the feminism movement. Come on.
We're all feminists. We're just not awakened to it yet.
Exactly. And I would like to be part of the awakening.
Yes.
Just as much as you are. I love it. Well, thank you for your message. I think it's a very important message, like I said to me, that is very overlooked and not even seen that it's even there.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope
it is there.
Opens some eyes up in their own life to see where they can see that and can start working on finding their worthiness.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me, Karen. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. We'll talk to you soon.